You're a creative professional, an artist, illustrator, composer, or musician. Perhaps like me you wondered, why instead of automating dirty, heavy and tedious jobs, have AI companies decided to automate one of the most fundamentally human qualities and drive towards creativity? The idea of progress, it seemed, was to replace loaders, sewage workers, and truck layers with robots, giving people the opportunity to start writing novels and composing poetry. Instead, investors are pouring money into technologies that imitate what humans still do significantly better. Gradually, however, automated services are edging people out of the lower budget segment of the creative market, while demand for sewage workers and plumbers remains as high as ever. Who would even want to algorithmically imitate fundamentally human creative processes? In my opinion, only people who hold a deep contempt for humanity and believe in a techno-messiah, a god from the machine who will finally be able to solve all of humanity's problems. But putting their motives aside, is the use of AI in art good or evil? It's impossible to answer the question without clarifying one essential point. Good for whom? Good for people, you might say. Why should we care about the well-being of machines? That's a valid question, but the answer is far from obvious. What makes you so sure that the world we live in prioritizes the well-being of people? And when I say people, I mean the majority, not the elites. Let's take the example of using artificial intelligence for generating images and music, and on that basis, examine what constitutes a good and for whom. Let me clarify straight away, none of the publicly available tools in their current form can be truly considered intelligence. A more accurate term for the technology is large language models. I'll use this term to emphasize the distinction between chatbots and yet mythical technology capable of reasoning like a human. I'll primarily rely on my own experience. I've experimented extensively with image generation using Midjourney and DALL-E 3, and one could say that I'm a skilled user. In my view, generating static images is currently the most predictable and practical application of models in art, which allows, albeit with some degree of generosity, to consider the prompt author a co-author of the work. Of course, we're still far from achieving true stability, meaning that errors sometimes have to be corrected manually. It's often easier to manually redraw the fingers on a good image than to try and replicate the model's success. Why am I describing these details in such depth? Because this brings us to a critically important criterion. When does technology serve as a tool for the creator, and when does it entirely replace them? Early attempts to establish this distinction legislatively in the United States have been somewhat unsuccessful so far, as the legal frameworks can be circumvented relatively easily. These modest steps are of immense importance for our shared future, as they ultimately determine who will be paid for their work, the author of the original creation, or someone who essentially pirated someone else's work, fed it into a model, and generated millions of copies. So the first beneficiary is of course the person solving a practical task. For example, I need thumbnails for videos. I know exactly what I want and how they should look. I prefer something between black and white photography and Dura-style pencil drawings, and I know how to achieve this using DALL-E 3 and Midjourney. For the cost of a subscription, I gain greater control and incomparably faster results than if I were to hire an illustrator. I may lose out on quality, but since this is auxiliary material for me, the loss is not critical. Who loses in this situation? The illustrator I didn't hire. Considering that my channel is a non-commercial project and my budget for thumbnails is limited to the same €20 I would never have hired an illustrator for the task in the first place. As a result, there are no losers here. So does that mean that those who express concerns about the use of large language models in art are simply short-sighted Luddites? This conclusion had been reached by quite a large number of my conversation partners. They aggressively defend the benefits of these technologies and view them as nothing more than tools for the artist. The problem with this perspective is that it's embarrassingly narrow-minded and limited to the interests of one or two individuals. If you step out of your personal bubble and look at the influence of these technologies on the global art market, things start to look quite troubling. The market consists of buyers who want a product or service, and professionals who fulfill commissions in exchange for payment. Money is critically important here. People who engage in art for the sake of personal fulfillment, those who paint or write purely for themselves without sharing or selling their work, don't have a significant impact on the market because they don't participate in the exchange. I, however, want to talk about professionals, focusing less on their level of mastery and more on the commercial aspect of their art. What impact do generative models have on the low-budget segment of the art market? They oversaturate it with low-quality content. At first glance, you might wonder, what's the problem? If people want to listen to your music, proponents of an unregulated market tell me, they listen regardless of how many algorithmic junk tracks have been churned out on platforms like Suno. My experience tells me otherwise. In the 2010s, I experienced the tail end of the stock photography industry. For those unfamiliar, a photo stock is essentially a massive database where photographers upload their photos in the hopes that someone will buy them. From the late 1990s until the mid-2000s, it was quite a successful industry, where images could be bought and sold for newspapers, educational materials, and commercial projects. I joined this world too late, entering during the wave of advancements and cost reductions in digital photography. My early experiments were modestly successful. My photos were purchased for advertising brochures and even for a Japanese history textbook. From just a few sales, I was able to buy a plane ticket for a seaside vacation. Considering the tiny proportion of my photographs compared to the 20 million images available at that time on the UK-based stock platform Alamy, this was a very impressive result. However, the improvement in the quality and accessibility of digital cameras led to the market being oversaturated with low-quality content. What was previously sold for £100 to £300 simply stopped selling. Faced with the choice between lower quality but freely available photos on sites like Pixabay and the more professional yet expensive images on traditional stock platforms, editors and business owners overwhelmingly chose the budget-friendly option. Then came microstock platforms, websites where, instead of the solid license and fees of classic stock agencies like Getty or Alamy, creators earned just a few cents per sale. The example of the photography industry clearly shows how technology made photography more accessible to tens of millions of hobbyists, while nearly destroying the professional market. Well, good riddance, the photography enthusiast might say. Now everyone is their own photographer. Yet during the days of photo studios, every family had at least one photo album, sometimes several. These albums were a tangible part of family life, even if they occasionally tested the patience of innocent guests. And here is me in this spa in 1978, and here's my graduation, and there is our wedding. Now, when anyone can snap 100 photos in 10 minutes, let me ask you this. How often do you actually look at the photos buried in these digital graveyards? Those hard drives sitting in your computers. This is the impact of technology on the former consumers of photography services. With the exception of seasoned professionals whose portfolios were built over decades, photographers today can no longer make a living solely from photography. Many are being forced to film video content, even if they don't like doing so. Consumers, on the other hand, instead of receiving a limited quantity of high-quality photographs, have been overwhelmed with an unimaginable volume of trashy snapshots, which they neither had the time nor desire to sort through or review. Social media albums have partially addressed this issue. They have provided some structure for these archives and offered a platform to share photos with followers. However, static content on social media has long been on its last legs, with reach that pales in comparison to video content. In my view, photography as an art form has lost. Customers have lost, and professionals, sadly, have also not come out as winners. The only participant in this process who have truly benefited are the manufacturers of digital cameras. This happened for exactly 3 reasons. First, the ability to simply press a button and instantly obtain a file ready for upload opened up photography to an unimaginably large number of people and brought immense profits to camera manufacturers. Second, most users were satisfied with photography that required no knowledge or skill whatsoever. Third, the overwhelming volumes of low-quality photography irreversibly changed the market, making commercial photography unprofitable. Now let's return to the topic of using large language models in music. Again, I'll draw from my own experience, this time working with Suno. For the record, I didn't stoop so low as to ask the application to write lyrics for me. I generated a song based on my own poems. In addition to the input box, there was a field for a brief description of the style. However, I couldn't specify a harmonic progression and ask the model to compose a melody based on it. I couldn't input anything specifically musical. Instead, I was limited to general descriptions like mood, instrumentation, or vocals. The description often ends up being ignored, for one very simple reason. Its sole purpose is to select a base sample that the song generation will be built upon. The results I received fell into 2 categories: either dull, generic tracks that sounded like everything within the genre, but nothing specific, or very impressive tracks where it was fairly obvious whose work had been capitalized upon. In the case of music, the issues with using AI models become particularly clear. The creator of the prompt cannot, by any stretch of imagination, be considered a co-author of the resultant piece, because they exert virtually no control over it. For example, make me a Christmas song. AI obliges. Here's your Christmas song. Done. If you're looking for reliably good results, Suno offers a rather questionable option with a murky legal status. You can download a song you like from the internet, upload it to Suno's site, and make a cover version in the style you want. Next, you can use the cover to create a persona that embodies all the stylistic traits of the song and then generate a new one using that persona. When uploading an audio file, Suno will ask, do you have the right to this work? Naturally, you say yes, and Suno pretends to believe you. What is actually happening in this scenario? Suno and similar services train their models on tracks created by human musicians. These models, at least for now, do not create anything original. They merely imitate and compile. Models are entirely dependent on the data they are trained on. The issue is that AI services do not ask for permission from copyright holders. By effectively parasitizing the creative works of individuals that have been made publicly available, they deprive the original creators of opportunities to earn. The argument that people can freely choose between listening to an artist track or an AI-generated piece is entirely flawed. Recent data from the music service Deezer suggest that 10,000 AI-generated tracks are uploaded to the platform every single day. To put that into perspective, let's consider the example of stock photography. In 2008, when I started working with Alamy, the platform hosted around 20 million photos. Today, that number has grown to 250 million. Humans are simply incapable of producing content at such an industrial pace. Even when creating music or images doesn't demand significant emotional effort, there is still an avoidable amount of technical work involved. From my observations of the collapse of the stock photography market under the weight of advancing technology, I can confidently predict the future of music streaming services. Those 10,000 AI-generated tracks per day will soon turn into 100,000, then into millions, and eventually hundreds of millions. Human-created works will inevitably become hopelessly lost in this avalanche. Unless streaming platforms introduce restrictions, or unless Suno and similar services begin losing copyright lawsuits on a massive scale, music streaming will die. Even if AI models will be able to generate music and images that are technically superior to those created by humans, at least better than the work of many average creators, does this mean they will fulfill the role in art that humans once did? If we consider a work of art purely as a commodity, then yes, a product has been generated, one that buyers are willing to pay for and consume, gaining their dose of endorphins or cortisol depending on the outcome. By that measure, the purpose is fulfilled. However, to view art solely as a commodity completely overlooks its deeper role. Art is, above all, a way to find meaning in existence, a method of expressing unique experiences. It is the chance to speak and be heard. A purely profit-driven approach erodes this human-centric purpose entirely, reducing art to nothing more than an extractive process that damages the very fabric of humanity. AI models lack lived experiences. They are not subjects capable of feeling or understanding. The so-called art they create is what Jean Baudrillard referred to as a simulacrum, a copy without an original. There is a similarity between plagiarism carried out by a machine and that committed by a mediocre composer or artist. Both steal from the unique experiences of others and make money. However, they are far from equal. A human plagiarist cannot operate at the scale of speed of an AI model. Hundreds of mediocre imitators simply cannot achieve what a single AI service can. Flooding the market with an endless stream of replicas that devalue the creative process itself. Even those selfless creators who never intended to sell their art could be driven to stop creating altogether, not because they wish to profit, but because they can no longer reach an audience. Their voices risk being drowned in a torrent of artificial noise. We must ask ourselves, what kind of world do we want to build? One where creativity is stolen for the sake of profit, generating countless copies that rob original artists of their ability to live off their work? Or one where a piece of art is, first and foremost, an expression of personal experience, and only then, perhaps a commodity? The issues we are discussing here are not technical at all. They are rooted in flawed business practices, the desire to automate everything, rake in profits, and generate passive income. It's an extremely lucrative business, far more profitable than creating tools for professionals using AI. After all, professionals are few, but the desire to create is universal. Can't play compose music? No problem. We'll give you a tool that will compose and play it for you. Just press the button. Buy from us the illusion of creativity. You should have learned music as a child. It's too late to learn to play now. Can't draw and know nothing about composition or color theory? Not an issue. Delegate your unfulfilled creative dreams to a digital avatar. Press the button. It's almost the same as creating something yourself. Dreamed of writing books but never managed to? We'll generate the story for you. Trust us. We'll live your life for you. It is people who are destroying the world of humanity, not machines. It's people, instead of encouraging creative independence and self-expression, who exploit the combination of a desire to create and inherent laziness. Independence doesn't help sales. A self-sufficient person is difficult to hook on a service that is ultimately nothing more than a crutch. In conclusion, I invite you to decide for yourselves what you truly want. Do you want tools that help you automate routine tasks and focus on the creative process, on what is genuinely human? Or do you want services that steal from those who create and sell shortcuts to those who are willing to surrender part of their humanity to an algorithm in exchange for quick results, damaging society in the process? I wish I could say that the choice is entirely yours, that you can freely decide which tools to use, what to delegate to models, and what to keep for yourselves. In your personal creativity and in your private life, this is certainly true. But the reality has moved far beyond individual choices. The fortress you build for yourself may help you safeguard your own little piece of ground, allowing you to stand firm. Yet your individual decisions won't help in the fight against giants like Suno. While you create your own work honestly, they train their models on your songs. To stop this from becoming a one-sided game, we need unity among artists, photographers, musicians, and all creative professionals. We need dialogue with lawyers and policymakers. The so-called free market is not free at all. What we're witnessing is the triumphant return of protectionism in the United States, as a response to the creeping protectionism of Europe and China. However, this is nothing more than a formal recognition of practices that have long been in place. Yes, European overregulation does slow down technological development, but when it comes to artificial intelligence, I agree more with the European approach than the American one. AI research, development, and services must be regulated. People should have preferences if we intend to remain here. And when I say people, I don't mean the elites. I mean aspiring musicians who didn't finish their studies, average artists, children who can't draw, and adults dreaming of writing a novel. This is a massive market and an opportunity for business as well, but for businesses that invest in the development of people, not machines.